I say Happy New Year to everybody, and let's hope that 2024 is as weird as we can hope.
Said, I listened to the broken noises in its throat, and then I did what no one else had ever done. I photographed it. So this is the world's first known image, photographic image of a zombie.
People interacted with the world, with much of that transformation taking place through the process of séance. In the home and in small rented rooms, mediums and believers alike could transcend social, cultural and gender norms, allowing women more bodily autonomy, empowering the working classes and inciting the dead to walk amongst us.
Provides a sort of a mythological and folkloric allusion to the possibility of paranormal realms with strange entities and quite often strange interaction.
I often think that that's us in this particular piece of work, in which we're an audience and we're witnessing something quite phenomenal. As you can see by the jagged lines that are emerging from the house that's physically levitating, and there's this odd goose that is flying away.
Helen Duncan was released in 1945 after serving her sentence and promised upon her release to conduct no further seances. This promise was not upheld, and she continued with her seances right up to her death in 1956 at her home in Edinburgh.
Right, I remember the very first time I ever saw Bigfoot. It was on the 6th of July, 1975. In that week's Radio Times, the world about us, monsters, mysteries or myths, had been ringed about 40 times in red crayon, and I waited for what seemed like a century until I found myself about 3 feet from the screen, binoculars around my neck and in my kung fu pajamas, not wanting to miss a thing.
Are you sure it's that one there, number 333? And I said, yep, that's the one. He said, so who is the old lady in the bay window? And I looked back at him again, looked at the house. There was nobody there. There's nobody to be seen.
In this cloud, said Rickard, marched the battalion. An hour or so later, the cloud, very unobtrusively, rose and joined the clouds overhead, whereupon they sailed off into the north, leaving no trace of the soldiers behind them. And that story first appeared in a New Zealand publication called Space View, which I'm sure you can see up there on the screen at the present time.
Ultimately, all of the people directly involved with the Titanic at the time are now long gone. But the myths, ghosts and legends live on to this day. And speaking of ghosts...
About a lifetime spent obsessed with UFOs and things that I've learned, which include, in my humble opinion, the fact that some of the most meaningful contributions have been made to ufology by people who never set out to be ufologists in the first place.
Those are the data. I took them yesterday, preparing this speech, from the JPAN. So the JPAN is the French, an official French organization for the study of PAN. So PAN is UAP in French. So JPAN is the study of UAP.
And much to the annoyance of his parents, brought home the lads from the rugby team. And they came into the bar and started having a right old knees up. And of course, his grandparents were furious. You know, they hadn't agreed to this, and they weren't going to stand for it. So they both got out of bed, put the dressing gowns on, stomped off down the stairs to tell their son to quiet it down and turf his friends out. Opened the door to the bar area where this full-blown raucous party was going on, and as they opened the door, everything went silent, and they were left staring at a dark, quiet, locked-up pub, exactly the way they'd left it.
We will try and unravel the mystery of what really happened at Langenhoe and if it's still haunted today. Where is Langenhoe? Our first question. Well, Langenhoe is clearly directly below Fingering Hoe. Now, for some reason, whenever I say Fingering Hoe, Americans laugh at me, and I still don't really understand why, but never mind. Let's just assume that I'm very naive. Here's the sound of a woman's voice. And Deaning says to him, are you sure you didn't imagine it? Because after all, you didn't report this until after I'd told you that story.
for what she originally smelled and not finding it. When she gets back to the stairs, it hasn't simply faded. The fragrance has gone. What could it all mean? The last sentence of her testimony provides a clue. 3 days later, I saw it in the local paper that a very dear friend of my late husband had passed away. Ah, there we have it. The description of the event ends at this point, but it seems clear that the writer has linked the olfactory episode to the death. Could it have been a communication from her late husband's very dear friend? The answer is left hanging, but it seems to offer at least the possibility of an answer.
If the place looks horrible and haunted, and infrasound is present, you will find that it increases the number of people who report experiences, or the intensity of the experiences that are used. On its own, of course, as I said earlier in the talk, wherever you are listening to this presentation in the world, you will be subjected to infrasound at sometimes quite high levels, and yet you're not all going, oh, there's a ghost and I'm having a paranormal moment. It needs to be, it's the cherry on the cake.
To address the problems with the current nomenclature, because it is a mess, the current nomenclature, as I hope I'll be able to illustrate. I mean, the bottom line, I suppose, is that if you visit places where strange things are going on, you may not always get away scot-free.
Same time every night, the figure at the edge of the trees, until one day he took a different path. And as he turned a bend in the darkness fell the hooting of an owl in the distance. The figure stepped out of the trees and stood in front of him. She spoke to him in a voice as old as the mountains and as capricious as the sea.
He is very, very human in his portrayal in Shropshire, and certainly I would argue that he is a character that is made of multitudes. I think that the devil walks unfettered amongst Shropshire folk, and he subtly interacts with his environment and influences all those he comes into contact with.
Is imagine that you're investigating a poltergeist case for, say, 20 months. You're the case manager, and you're recording every incident that the family report to you. In 20 months, how many events would you be expected to deal with in that 20 months? So just pop a number.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Right, the exact number of reports that we've had in the 20 months is 1,195. That's around 3 per day, with very few days of no activity. So that's the sort of numbers that we're talking about.
As said, I'm actually going to be talking tonight about a pattern which has emerged from a reanalysis of the book written by Andrew Green, one of the most influential ghost hunters of the second half of the 20th century, whose example, particularly in the 1970s, encouraged, inspired, and indeed continues to shape many efforts in what we call ghost hunting and spontaneous case investigation today.
The bizarrely paranormal case of the Uber 5 tragedy. Hardly anyone seems to really know why they went there. And I think I do. I believe they may have been chased up the mountain by the moon. Can you see this? I don't know if you can see this slide. UFO over Loomis. Several report strange sightings.
2022, I started the Durham Ghost Walks, walking with the ghosts of Durham. I didn't think it was going to be as big as it is. I thought interest wouldn't be very much. Few walks, and that would be it. 3 years later, I'm still doing it. Real good. I'm really enjoying it.
Where the wow signal is concerned. Because effectively, even Jerry Eamon, who was the first person to receive it and actually wrote "wow" around the computer printout and was the first person to notice what they'd got. He thought originally that this 72-second narrowband signal from space was a bizarre combination of an earthbound signal that had bounced off space hardware and come back to his radio, the Big Ear radio telescope. He was subsequently persuaded that he was wrong, which means that even he thinks it might be extraterrestrial. All bets are off. There's no reputable answer. But one interesting thing about this is that this signal was picked up at 10:42. Well, I think it's 10:42 without double checking my crib sheet. 10:42 p.m. on the 15th of August, 1977. Elvis Presley was living out his last hours at the time. And when I'm doing the UFO talk, one of the points I make is that because any plausible theory is as good as any other, my take on the WOW signal, and the reason it only appeared once, is it's the Space Brothers calling Elvis home. That may be one of the strangest. I don't seriously mean that. It's just a kind of hostage to fortune, since nobody can explain the WOW signal. That argument is as good as any. The circumstantial evidence for it is no better or worse than many of the other claims made.
What does ASSAP do?
So ASSAP is a scientific and orientated charity that discusses and investigates cases of anomalous phenomena.
Is that he refers to some of these craft as coming with pilots, and he didn't refer to them as aliens. He referred to them as non-human intelligences, which to some might just sound like splitting hairs, but it's led to a train of thought, and he's coming out with more stuff now, where actually we're not talking about aliens turning up on these craft. We're talking about them being potentially transdimensional, which is just mind-blowing, isn't it?
So that the deceased individual had been buried with an eagle's wing, indicating that they had some idea of religion and the afterlife. And in late September this year, it was announced that some of the superb cave paintings in the south of France may have been painted by Neanderthals rather than anatomically modern humans. At the same time, some archaeologists have also suggested that another pre-human species, Homo naledi, may have buried its dead in barely accessible caves in Africa. That's where their remains have been found, and it's been suggested that this is conscious burial. There is therefore very good evidence suggesting that spiritual impulse and religion predates the emergence of anatomically modern humans.
These are some pretty young pictures of a young Dale kind of doing things around. I travel all across the country trying to scope out and investigate different locations. The upper left-hand corner is the Mako train station in North Carolina, where spook light has been seen. And I'm exact an area of light between 600 and 900 nanometers, a very, very thin area of infrared light.
A year earlier, it came across a tale about the devil and its association with an old Georgian manor house in the village of Ballinity in County Limerick. Here is its legend.
We're going to have sort of an informal get-together chat about ghost stories, what led you to ghost stories, what brought you to this field.
So how did the Bennington Triangle, pictured on the right, come about? It's in Northeast America. I'll show you exactly where in a moment. And it actually came about through the efforts of one man, Joseph A. Citro. Make a note of that name. You'll hear it a few times tonight.
That's something I want to add to the melting pot are some Lucky Charms, and that's the image you can see on the right there is the American cereal Lucky Charms, which incidentally arrived in 1964, the same year as this leprechaun invasion, flap or hunt or whatever we choose to call it. And I think that year is obviously a good year for leprechauns.
Roughly what they thought the haunting was to do with. And I was coming out with story after story after story that had never been really publicized or talked about. And I turned up at the filming, and there's a reason I'm telling you all this. I turned up at the filming with a stack of research, probably about 2 inches thick. And we probably used 1% of it for the episode. It was the Frankie Essex episode, if anyone's wondering.
far as the RAPs are concerned, from the November of 2022, when the case first came to us, to really the beginning of this year, we didn't have many RAPs at all. Then suddenly the house we had something, but in July, I think it was something like 165 RAPs events that had occurred from January to July of this year. And what we're beginning to experience is they were performing differently. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to cover this tonight.
He is called the Anglo Star, the recording angel. And he mutters, and he names, and he shames, and he speaks. All the names of those who will perish for the next year. Their names are read out before the church bells ring midnight. And in the following year, they will all be gone.
Zoya says, wait a minute, that would mean the ghost would have to be a time traveller. Then the room went silent as I elaborated this. Think about it, the opera singer repeats every 19 stations. For a ghost to respond to us within a few seconds of when we ask a question, are you dead? What year did you die? The ghost would have to know what the question was, travel to the radio station, influence the DJ to play a song or a specific word to the exact moment that we ask it, and to make sure it aligns with our questions that we haven't asked yet. Bear in mind, most songs are 3 minutes long. And that doesn't account for when words are split between multiple stations to make this happen. The ghost would essentially have to travel back in time and manipulate events perfectly, even though multiple people are asking different questions that are crossing over with each other.
And indicative of somebody having applied a great deal of force to her throat, and also mobile hyoid bone, which is again very, very indicative of some sort of crushing force being applied to her throat. And she had, half a litre, not 300 millilitres. She had 10 broken ribs, but all on one side.
If any of you have had the luck to go to the Shed Museum in Bristol, where you will see a book, and many of you may not realise it's made with the skin of John Horwood, taken from his back. It was sent to a tannery in Bristol and made into leather, then etched, and a Dr. Smith added his notes about John inside.
I have made coal spots a bit of a life study. Therefore, the quote had a certain resonance for me, as I have indeed spent a long time and very many hours, and a great many occasions staring into cold spots and wondering about what lies within, hoping that they may be connected to some form of afterlife or existence after bodily death, or fearing in some ways that they might be so. It is true to say that not everyone can sense or experience cold spots. Most people can in one way or another, but people often ascribe the effect a cold spot has on them to different causes. Perhaps they had a bad turn or feeling, or experienced this horrible thing that we can have sometimes, that somebody walked over my grave.
Chilling account I'd like to share with you. She says that one evening I came home, I was going upstairs, I was going to get changed, I finished my night shift, got home at 7:30, I stepped onto the stairs, and immediately I felt something, or someone right behind me. I ran up, and it followed. I could hear the footsteps behind me, boom, 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 boom. And then I slammed the door into Louisa's room. Whatever it was, it hit the door. It physically hit the door, and I just had to hold the door shut. And Louisa's there watching TV in her room, and we are holding this door closed, trying to stop whatever it is on the other side.
And I think Mike wasn't too far away. He was over in this other room, just off the back of the lift. So I stopped this experiment, and I said, I was quite firm. I said, come on, guys, we start this experiment. Why are you talking? Because we need to lock this down and carry on. We've got a limited amount of time that we have to get this experiment underway to see what we can find. And they said it wasn't them. Nobody in that area was speaking, but they could all clearly hear incredibly loud two men having a very clear conversation.